Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 59 of Relating to DevSecOps, where we explore the development, security, and operations issues of today so we can solve real world problems with people that face them. I know you're probably tired of seeing our faces, but I promise we have our first guests lined up. We're just working on scheduling to get some more points of view in here. But until then, it's just us for another couple of episodes. But I think we have some interesting things to talk about, at least in our heads. You know, we've been throwing things back and forth. So I'm joined again by Mike. Mike, how are things going in your world today in this other nighttime episode where neither of us are wearing funny or offensive shirts?
That's going very well due to that. No, everything's good. Security's still going. Economy hasn't crashed yet. Things
Oh man, you're
are.
gonna put that out there?
Yeah. Today's the day I put it out there. So tomorrow it'll crash. No, things are good. A lot of interesting stuff happening in the security world. So looking forward to talking about our topic tonight.
All right, let's do it. So my cat has joined us, so might have some of that as well in this episode. Our first guest, everyone.
What does DevSecOps mean to you?
Yeah, tell us, please. There you go.
There you go.
I know. There it is. There it is. Yep. Okay, cool. So I'll probably cut that. Or maybe not. We can just leave it in there. We're off to a great start here. So today's topic, I think, Mike, we were talking about this in the pre-show. We're talking about how do we integrate or bring penetration testing into the world of DevSecOps. And I was struggling myself with how this all fits together. So I'll turn it to you. Like, tell me what's going through your head around penetration testing in DevSecOps and how you may think of it or look at it.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing for me to start with is setting definitions for what a pen test is. I always, whenever someone says, hey, how much for this pen test or what does a pen test involve? It's like, what do you mean by a pen test? Like, what exactly does that mean to you? Because everything, it used to be, network assessment, trying to get into the network, pivot, do things like that. Now that's maybe more red team, and a pen test could be an application assessment, but an application assessment could be a code review. So it's like all these words are so loaded and mean different things. But I guess for this, we mean all those things to a degree. A pen test and application assessment, a point in time engagement where something about your environment gets looked at. And yeah, I think it's tricky. Like we were talking about before the show, is DevSecOps is a iterative kind of process where you're always doing it. It's not a one-time thing. You're always doing testing. And so how do you integrate this one-time thing? Maybe you do a quarterly or a yearly assessment. Then how do you just take all those results and put it back into it? I mean, my initial thought is that, what's the Marine saying of like, 2 is 1 and 1 is none. So, you have your DevSecOps processes, you have your testing, maybe it's SAST, maybe it's DAST, maybe it's bug bounty. Then you have these quarterly or yearly assessments that are another additional layer of testing on top of those things to kind of have another layer of somewhat of assurance that your apps or whatever else that you're testing, at least in theory, don't have vulnerabilities. Hopefully they get picked up by SAST, they get fixed then. If not then, hopefully they get picked up by DAST. If not then, hopefully they get picked up by your bug bounty. If not then, your quarterly or yearly kind of pen test. So I think of it as kind of another layer of coverage. But I do think people have to, avoid breaking their DevSecOps process and especially how they deal with findings to do these kind of yearly assessments that they're generally forced to do for SOC or for PCI or for whatever other kind of requirement they have to do these often. But I don't know. How do you see like, have you seen a successful way to integrate pen testing, whatever that might mean, into a DevSecOps environment organization?
For me, I don't think that I've seen penetration testing integrated into what we would define as DevSecOps. So I think What I mean by that, I think it's important, just like you said, all of these different terms mean different things to different people. So let me start by I'll give you my definitions of the terms that I hear in this vast world of penetration testing and DevSecOps. And then maybe you can tell me if you agree or disagree with any of them. Let's start there, and then I can sort of talk about what I think can be integrated or what I've seen integrated. So to me, we've defined it before, and we haven't had our 2023 What is DevSecOps episode to see if this has changed. But um, DevSecOps to me is about the mindset of working together and understanding that everyone is moving towards the same goal: security, enabling the business, enabling security as an integration to software. It is about the collaboration aspect between all teams, not just development, security, and operations, even though that's in the title of the show, but like project management and penetration testing teams and red teams and third-party vendors, and like working collaboratively, not just cooperating with each other. And the last part of it, I think, is something that is implicit in when people talk about DevSecOps, which is automation. So then if we look at penetration testing, I think for me, penetration testing usually means I had one penetration testing firm that called their pen tests adversarial simulations. And that's how I look at pen testing, which is I have a goal. I'm going for the crown jewels. You tell me what my targets are and what my scope is, and I'm going to find the target. That's how I sort of look at a pen test. But I do know that other people and other organizations will define like an application pen test as a full scope application assessment where you're trying to find as many vulnerabilities as you can. And to me, I don't really look at that as a pen test. I look at that as a dynamic assessment, as an application assessment, because you're going for breadth, not depth. And I think inherent in penetration testing is the penetration aspect of it. Basically, how can I get to the target, as opposed to evaluating the entire application or the entire ecosystem or whatever it might be. A penetration tester is not going to tell you all the vulnerabilities that in Active Directory, all the vulnerabilities in your network, all the vulnerabilities in your firewall, all the vulnerabilities in this, and give you this full scope. They're going to tell you how they got to the target. And so to me, that's what I look at as a pen test. And I don't think that aspect, the adversarial simulation aspect, can be a part of DevSecOps. I think the results can, like the output of the pen test can be vulnerabilities, which then you look at remediating, which can be integrated into a DevSecOps process. So I think that there's been some success there. And I think that other aspects of what people consider penetration testing, like red team, which is sort of this ongoing internal team that is constantly using offensive security techniques to test things, I think that differs from adversarial simulation. So I think that there's sort of this nuance of like what can fit and what doesn't fit. And so I think that if it fits in the definition of, does it have the mindset of security as an enabler? Probably not. Adversarial simulation is not trying to do that. Is it collaborative? Not really. They're adversarial, right? They're acting as your adversary. You're not cooperating or collaborating with them. After you've established the scope. After you've established the scope, maybe there's some collaboration that you could fit in. And then can you automate it? Absolutely. I don't think so. The idea is that there's a human attacker or some sort. You could probably do some testing, but is that really, vulnerability scanning? So I don't really think that piece fits into DevSecOps. I know it's a kind of a long-winded answer, but the way that I look at pen testing is typically associated with adversarial simulation. I don't see that fitting in. But there are other aspects of offensive security testing, like a dynamic assessment or perhaps, pointed offensive security type tests or red teaming or purple teaming or, blue team, red team exercises that maybe can fit in. And I could probably talk more about that. So those are my definitions, my thoughts. Agree or disagree? Challenge or concede?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you that if DevSecOps is supposed to be that automated, iterative, collaborative process, red teaming or pen testing, whatever you want to call it, is seems hard to fit into the same kind of program because red teaming, pen test is all it should be manually done. It should be someone sitting there learning your environment and trying to figure out how to get into whatever they're trying to get into and access whatever data. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you that it isn't, um, it doesn't fit the model very well. I guess my follow up question would be, how then do you take the lessons learned at least from a pen tester, a red team, or whatever term you want to use, and then feed that back into a DevSecOps process so that say the next time you do one, the results are better. At least they're different. They hack you in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you could flip it into your vulnerability management process, which we've talked. Maybe we haven't talked about that, but I think we have an episode on that. I have to go check on how to get your vulnerabilities and your sort of issue tracking, getting that stuff automated. So maybe automating the test that was done by the pen testing team. As I'm thinking about it, something that's occurring to me is I bet you that the pen test teams could leverage DevSecOps practices in their pen tests.
Mm-hmm.
That might be something to consider as well. You know, there's, I mean, environments stand up and like, command and control and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an idea. So if you have an internal pen test team, not a red team, then that might be something. Or if you have an internal red team, using DevSecOps techniques to help enable them might be something. Just an aside there. What do you think about that? How about people with internal pen testing teams? Can they use DevSecOps practices? Does it fit the definition to help their pen testing teams or their red teams?
Yeah, I'm sure it does. I mean, you look at actual adversaries and they've automated a huge amount of what they do. So obviously, if you're simulating that, you're going to do the same thing of setting up your, ephemeral systems, any tooling you need. Yeah, the more automation, the better. I think the other thing is DevSecOps, maybe not tooling, but pipelines, especially in the DevOps side, pipelines, those are a great target for red teams and pen tests. I mean, those things usually have the keys to the kingdom. So those are definitely a good target, which I think actually one thing I was to answer my own question, one thing I would say is that I think when you have findings from a red team or a pen test, pulling whatever those services are that you had those findings into your DevSecOps process is like I think that's a good argument for doing that. Like if your apps are in really good shape, if your cloud infrastructure is in really good shape, but like your AD is a mess, then maybe you should be pulling in your AD configuration into your DevSecOps process. Use the findings from your red team to kind of fight for more ground in your DevSecOps process or cover more ground, have more things in scope.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then I guess going off of the vulnerability management aspect, how does output from a pen test differ from your vuln management scans in terms of integrating into a DevSecOps process?
Yeah, I mean, DevSecOps generally doesn't, like, those findings don't chain things together. They're not like, I use this SQL injection to get a foothold on this server. I use the misconfigured IAM policy to then access this service. And then, it doesn't have that. It has a very siloed kind of view of what the risks are. Whereas a red team finding would be exactly those steps that they took to go from the first kind of foothold throughout the entire environment. And I mean, maybe that's an evolution of DevSecOps to integrate more of that, because that's also part of kind of a threat model exercise, is how those different vulnerabilities could be, how different systems, how different vulnerabilities in those systems could be abused in a red team type of scenario. So that might be almost like a different angle on doing DevSecOps, is don't just look for vulnerabilities and how those are fixed with your tooling, but how are all your systems used together to as a kind of a threat surface, as an attack surface. So you kind of have those things from beginning to end pinned down. But I mean, have you ever seen anyone go to that level? I feel like people still struggle with the basics of integrating tooling, getting feedback to developers, being collaborative, going to the next level, and almost integrating like attack chains and threat models throughout an entire DevSecOps process. That seems kind of advanced.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that if anybody is doing that, that they're calling it DevSecOps. I feel like there are some automations or detections that are happening that are facilitating um like automatic response or automatic breach response stuff, like where you will perhaps react like the SOAR type of thing. And I think it's more of like the SOAR um operations side when it comes to what is the automation aspect of security and the collaboration aspect of security. I don't really think it's called DevSecOps. So I think that once it gets out of the quote software app, the application bit, it's less likely that you're going to see it defined as DevSecOps. But I think that the techniques and the practices are certainly there. If as an example, you want to talk about how you are testing for that logging is in a specific place so that it can facilitate your incident response process, and that will automatically tell you and alert the appropriate people and create an automatic response. That's sort of your automated breach response. Could you look at it as DevSecOps? Probably. I think that is happening, just not under the umbrella of DevSecOps traditionally. And I think that there may be something to leveraging something like MITRE, like the attack framework, to try to figure out how that might fit into software. Because I do think that there are aspects of, and we've talked about this in like other episodes, there's aspects of what we do in other areas of security, like logging, establishing specific responses to events. We do this in like application servers, but maybe not in the business logic in the code. We kind of, I don't say but I see a lot of general logging in applications, request response, or server logging or things like that, and less specific logging than you might find in like a server application or IAM or something along those lines, or even your cloud events. There's less granular logging when it comes to the inner workings of an application, and I would love to see more there that would align. I think maybe something to that effect.
Yeah. I mean, so like you use the example of like SOAR. Is SOAR DevSecOps? Would we consider? I always think of DevSecOps as preventative, as stuff like prevent it from going out the door insecure. SOAR is like it went out the door insecure, and either someone breached it or it just went out the door and we're fixing it.
Well, I think it kind of depends on how, like, what you look at as your software development lifecycle. So if you look at your software development lifecycle all the way to monitoring, under like a maintenance phase, then it probably is, I think, because your monitoring is going to facilitate the incident response, and then the response to that is it goes to SOAR, and integrating with SOAR might be something to think about. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that they're definitely related, but I don't think I would call SOAR necessarily DevSecOps in the same way that I don't really call CI/CD tooling DevSecOps. I think that the integration is part of the DevSecOps process, or like the method, but I don't think that we have to put it under like this DevSecOps umbrella for it to be useful. I think that it's part of the maintenance and monitoring phase, and that you should absolutely leverage it if it is part of your ecosystem and the tool set that you have.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I feel like I think the funny thing I'm just thinking about this is like security as a community and culture has pushed DevSecOps. And so to be like, all right, you do DevSecOps, awesome. You do all these integrations, great developer involvement, automation, feedback, all that stuff, and like, all right, it's out to production. All right, we're not paying attention anymore. Like, you did DevSecOps, you're good to go. Like, it'd be funny to think of that as like someone thinking, DevSecOps doesn't cover that. Therefore, if you just do DevSecOps, you're in a good spot. Don't need to worry about monitoring and alerting and things like that. Where obviously the entire lifecycle matters when you're thinking about security. So I think it's kind of bringing up a gap in the mindset of DevSecOps.
Well, I think, you kind of defined it in two ways. Like, I don't think that you do DevSecOps, right? I think that's part of why I like the idea of it being a mindset and collaboration, and why we poke fun at it and make fun of it, even though we are, I guess, supporters of it, is that, DevSecOps is fundamentally about collaboration and making sure that there is security integrated at every part of the development lifecycle. And it's the expansion of things like shift left, extend right, and all these other aspects of like, how do you get security into your engineering process? And it is not just like DevOps is not a role, SRE is the role. DevSecOps is not a role. The security engine, the product security or application.
Not according to LinkedIn. Okay, there's a lot of DevSecOps experts out there.
I mean, I agree, but I think that's why we struggle so much on the definition, and why, like, is pen testing, DevSecOps? I think these are interesting questions, because it's like, how can we take this mindset, this thing, and help to facilitate things like pen testing? Because to me, it's like, yeah, maybe it doesn't really fit, like we were talking about, but pen testing teams could use these concepts to make it easier. And I mean, that just reminded me of, have you seen that there is now ransomware as a service? Have you been plugged into that at all? Yeah. So, I mean, adversaries are building products to facilitate attacking you. And using these same CI/CD processes and help desks and support and open source to facilitate the same thing. So our pen testing team should absolutely, sort of be thinking about how to make it easier to get to the point where they are just ideating and executing on the things that are most complex, as opposed to like, what scan do I run, or like, what's that nmap command, or we should be like, that stuff should be automated. I think that would be, and those are the things I think you could integrate into your engineering process. It's like you could, but again, I think of it as like dynamic testing. Then you're just writing a test. That is a security test, right? It's not automating pen testing, or it's not really pen testing to me. It's not simulating an adversary. It's preparing for what the adversary might do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, I agree with your point on adversaries. Again, this goes to the thing we always talk about, is security is always kind of behind the game. Like, we're always trying to catch up to what adversaries are doing. And yeah, there's services at every level, services that buy credentials, services that validate credentials, services that give you a foothold into an environment. So yeah, there's like anything you need in the threat actor world, there's a service for you.
It's true.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think going back to, I'm kind of stuck on the whole SOAR and monitoring and reacting thing. Like, I feel like when we want, there's kind of like a fantasy in the security world, like, oh, security is going to go away. It's going to become just the role of developers, kind of like how quality or performance or reliability, like all those things are just part of what a developer has to do. So security is going to go away. You're not going to be a security person anymore. You're just going to be a developer, no security. I think it's complete BS. But anyway, if anyone is a complete security expert and also an amazing developer, they are probably starting their own company to be, create some amazing product. So I think that's unrealistic. That's my hot take for the day. But if DevSecOps is the mindset, the culture to push security into their world and to do more integrations, have more collaboration, I feel like we do have to include like the remediation side of things. Like developers, that's like an old school mentality to be like, all right, here's the code, DevOps, you figure out how to make this run. It works on my machine. Same thing from a security perspective of, okay, we ran DAST, we ran SAST, whatever your DevSecOps processes are. And then like it's out there, oh, it got hacked. That's not our problem. Like if we want to enable developers to go to that next level where they are doing more of the security on their own, and you do have this like very enabled development community within your company. Yeah, I think that's kind of the next thing they have to understand is operation, like security operations. Not to say being, on call, but I don't know, maybe they're on call for security incidents. Maybe they have automation similar to outages to handle those kind of things. I don't know. You just made me think about this when talking about DevSecOps and then SOAR and how those two things kind of integrate. Way off topic from pen testing, but
Yeah. I mean, we do have an episode title in the bucket to talk about SOAR. So maybe we can sort of offshoot into that in another episode. But you made sort of 2 points there. One was the SOAR aspect of it, and the other was talking about I think, was it the roles of people, and that we have this dream that engineers are going to be integrating security into every aspect of their software and things of that nature. So I think that in the realm of pen testing, I think that what pen testing does is raise awareness of how an attacker might come after an application, and it's also amazing at showing a proof of concept of an exploit. A pen test is reality. It is, somebody attacked an application that was live, and there's really not a lot of arguing with the results of a pen test, or if there is, it's a vulnerability assessment, right? Because they're showing the path to the goal and to the target, or they're saying we didn't reach it or we only got this far. So the report is, how far did we get? What did we acquire? What was weak, and how did we get there? But it's not comprehensive. So I think that going back to that's the output of that goes into the engineering teams, raises awareness and things like that. But at the end of the day, it's like we talked about incentives to do what you do, that engineers are incentivized to create products, not software, but products that fulfill a specific need or goal, or they're excited about. And there's a creativity aspect to that to make the code more elegant, more efficient, more functional. And so I think that to engineers that think that they want to be security experts, or that they don't have to worry about security, I think everyone can take a beat and think about what they're passionate about, on and off the field. It's just like, if you are excited every single day about thinking about new security tasks, new security protections, how to architect this in a secure way, and if you get sort of jazzed up about that type of thing, you're a security engineer. It's like you are thinking about security all the time, and you're probably not thinking about the most functional stuff, because what's going on in your brain is, how do I break it? Okay, I think I have a protection here, but what if I did this way? What if I did it that way? You're thinking about the breaks. An engineer is thinking about the same types of things, like, oh, I achieved my goal. What if I did it this way? Or what if I did it that way? What if I made it more efficient? Or, this doesn't look right. Or I have a different architecture idea. We have different muscles that we like to exercise. It's like, I like building things. I like, doing like light carpentry, and I like building, sheds and things out of wood. And,
wait. How is a shed light carpentry?
Stuff. Yeah, exactly. But this is my point. If I got good enough to where like that's all I thought about, I'm probably a carpenter at that point. And I think we both know people that have made these career shifts into like carpentry and, doing other things that they've made their hobbies, their professions. But it's like at a certain point you become what you're interested in. So I think that at a certain point, an engineer that's really good at security is so passionate about security, they become a security engineer. And so maybe they're a really good developer, but you want them in your engineering teams, because not every engineer has that same desire to do those things. Just like every amateur hobbyist of like me building sheds is not going to become a carpenter. I like it. I don't like it enough to go that far. And I don't think I speak for everybody. There's like some rock stars that do it all well, but I think en masse, it's important that we understand each other and work together and try to figure out how we can take pieces of each other's functions and integrate them. That's the collaborative aspect of it. I think that's what I get excited about is how can we find ways into these different areas. So I really like this pen testing question because of that, because it's how can I work with my adversary simulator to integrate it into my software development process beyond just the output. So I think, in that case, like there's probably, now I'm sort of coming back. If I'm thinking about it in that way, there might be maybe not adversarial simulations, but perhaps services that are more collaborative that come from pen testing shops where, I know that there are instances where you will seed access and things like that. I've only very lightly been involved in like the application side of pen testing, and then very early in my career, I did some like, light pen tests and stuff, but most of it's been apps. So I don't really know beyond organizing a pen test, what that would be, what service that would be that these firms would find interesting, lucrative, or worth the effort or worth their while. Have you seen anything like that?
Well, I mean, I know there's the examples of like purple teams where you kind of combine both sides to work attacker defender, and I think there's some people who offer kind of purple team engagements of showing both sides. I'm not sure how much adoption there has been for those types of services. I think the big problem when you do a pen test is generally pretty easy because you get your scope, you get your systems, maybe you have a foothold, or you're just starting completely fresh, and you do what you do, right? Like you don't need to know much more about the environment than what you learn when you're going. When you do defensive work, you really have to know the environment. So I think that's always the struggle when doing defensive, like consulting engagements, and it's true for internal people too at companies that are trying to solve issues, is they don't always have the full context. So I think that's where you kind of struggle with. It's easy to come and do a 2-week pen test and charge whatever, but it's much harder to go in and say, we're going to fix all these things. We're going to help you create detections for all these things without knowing the full environment. So there definitely is a market for that, but I don't know how much adoption there has been for that type of engagement. I personally hope that kind of the pen test, I mean, we do them, but I hope the pen test kind of thing goes away to some degree, because I do feel like it needs to be more of a life cycle, and hiring someone to beat you up once a year and say like, hey, all the stuff or most of the stuff you already knew about is still true, and here's some more things you didn't know about that you need to fix. Like, it has value. It drives home the point. We've been doing pen testing for I don't know how long, and we're still seeing basic issues pop up. Like, it has to mature to a point where you're actually solving issues. And part of that is integration with DevSecOps and being more collaborative, and being an adversary without being like a real adversary. Maybe being an adversary without being an a-hole. Always a problem.
Maybe there's like this intermediary step where the strategic, I don't know if people would even pay for this, but there's the strategic consulting aspect of it where it's like you have the pen test, maybe you're going after what could be the root cause of the vulnerability that was discovered. So, there's always there's the immediate vulnerability, like, it wasn't patched, or, so you need to patch all your things, or, there was a secret in plain text and we use that. Because I think that, it's like once you are, it's like the thing about pen testing, I think, is like, you're not looking for all of the ways in, you're kind of looking at you're looking at the pivoting aspect of it. Like, once someone's broken the hard shell and gotten to the soft mushy center, how are they moving around, where where are all the places that they can go and establish more footholds and grow their footprint. And I think we do understand this, because when it comes to like incident response and MSPs and eradication of threats on the breach response side, we know how to eradicate a threat and defend against it in real time. And, there are specialists that do those types of things and are looking for the TTPs and trying to figure out, like, how do we get to the next, how do we get rid of all these things? And I think there might be some value in combining those two services defensively that could be sort of looked at as a DevSecOps method, where it's like, okay, now that the attacker has broken in and established this foothold and left all of these artifacts, here is the evaluation of what you need to do to defend against this, because this is how we might approach it if we were going to eradicate the threat. But I think it is about looking at the larger contextual picture, just like you said, to figure out what is the root cause of this. What are the practices that sort of led to this failure that allowed, folks to break in? Or was it a fluke? Was it just a single vulnerability that you forgot, and that would solve the issue? And I think that too many folks look at a pen test as like, all right, I'll fix the 10 issues that they use to get in this one attack scenario. But just like we don't like threat modeling one attack scenario, that's kind of the problem, right? Is we talk about threat modeling early on, like you don't want to just focus on one attack vector because you're missing the defenses. But when we get to the pen testing side, we're like, there's this, I got to solve these issues immediately. It's like you got to take a step back and figure out, okay, you've solved all those, but is there a more systemic way to solve them? I don't think that all pen testing firms look at it that way. I do think that the good ones do.
Yeah.
And I've seen folks, go into those consulting engagements, but I don't think I've seen it enough to be like, yeah, that's DevSecOps-y or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think so much of security has been whack-a-mole and finding and fixing the same issues over and over again. And yeah, I mean, I go back to like, if you can use pen tests if you have a really awesome DevSecOps, process, program, collaboration, like culture, and your AD, just keep hopping on this, but like your AD server sitting out there and there's like one guy who manages that, and you don't have any processes around that. You don't have any security or anything like that. Like use your pen test as an argument to say, look, we have a really great, or even if it's a half decent program, let's pull this into it. This is going to reduce our risk because we have it, codified. We have monitoring. We have, we have multiple people involved making configuration changes. Like let's expand our program to cover more things that we know an adversary would find, because we have proof that an adversary, at least a simulation, found it. So I think that's how, going full circle back to the original question, I think that's kind of how I see it being valuable, is using to expand kind of the foothold of your DevSecOps. Because I think we think of it as very app focused, and apps are definitely one part of where pen test, adversaries, red teams, whatever, they definitely focus a good bit there, but there's so many more pieces to it, especially once they already have a foothold into your environment. Like apps are one way to do it, but there's plenty of other ways. And then once they're in, there's tons more than just apps they're going to focus on. So I think expanding those good kind of foundational things that you have in your DevSecOps process out to other areas of the company and technologies is good.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the 1AD server out there and, integrating it into apps and things of that nature. And that made me think, a lot of infrastructure, including AD servers, are being spun up by, I see infrastructure as code. So there is probably some aspect to it where it will be suggested that your configuration for your Active Directory servers meets a specific scenario, like a specific configuration, or you need to make a particular adjustment. And in that case, if you are not leveraging infrastructure as code, it might be an opportunity to use that to make your deployments more consistent, especially if you have like one rogue instance. You'd be like, oh, well, this didn't fall into the, our deployment mechanism or whatever. So I think that might be an aspect too, is like maybe in the remediations of these things, you could start to pool some of these into the automation processes that exist inside of CI/CD when you're deploying not only application workloads, but infrastructure workloads.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's we got to add another part to the circle for the DevSecOps lifecycle. Okay.
What are we gonna call it? What's the? You're
We'll
talking
think
about the pillars or the circle? Are we talking the circle one or the three pillars?
we're gonna have to modify both.
Oh, okay.
This
All
is
right.
that big of a change.
We're So maybe the 2023 definition is expanding for DevSecOps from our three pillar system to a four pillar system and a wheel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have
Because
to write
graphs, frameworks, and matrices, they're the way to go. That's
yeah.
how we know we're doing things secure.
We have to write a very strongly worded letter to the right people to get another column added.
It's true. Well, let's call OWASP. Yeah, so I mean, I think we went a little bit long on that one, but I do, man, I'm still not, I don't think we've closed the conversation out though. I've got, my brain is working on the SOAR stuff and things, so we might have to do a part two just on SOAR and maybe the red teaming, DevSecOps in red teaming and DevSecOps in pen testing, as a facilitator to those teams might be something to think about as well. But any final thoughts from you? I think I'm tapped out, but anything you want to close out with?
No, I mean, I think if people listening have thoughts, places they've seen these kind of different activities be integrated well with their DevSecOps processes, like I'd love to hear about it. So definitely reach out and kind of talk about success stories, either internal, external, other talks that might touch on this topic too. I think it'd be interesting to learn more about kind of what people have done in this area.
Cool. Well, that is a wrap. If you've made it this far, then thank you very much for listening. Thank you to our very special guest, Izzy the cat, for joining us in the first portion of the show. We are seeing folks reach out now. We're seeing a lot of activity in the various spaces, so we really appreciate everyone that's spent time listening to us. If you want to reach out and get in touch with us, you can reach us at security at r2dso.com. You can also reach us on Twitter at r2dso. And you can reach us on LinkedIn. We're up there as well, and we've got some videos, comments, and things happening there. And the YouTube channel is launched also at r2dso. So we're expanding and growing our ways to get to you. So please reach out. If you want to be a guest on the show, please let us know. Or if you know anybody that would be a good guest for the topics that we talk about, it'd be great to have them on and talk to them as we enter the second half of 2023. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.